Terror at a shopping mall in Munich. Police are hunting for 3 gunmen after what they call a shooting rampage. Mobile phone footage shows one of 3 suspected gunmen opening fire. At least 9 people have been killed. More footage captures a gunman on the roof of the shopping centre, his weapon clearly visible. Terrified shoppers fled for their lives. Many people have been injured. Armed police rushed to the scene and are combing the area now for the attackers.
Darüber hinaus mehrere Schwerverletzte.
There are many badly injured. Our crisis team is taking care of about 100 people, and all the police forces are busy with the manhunt.
The German police are calling it a terror attack, but say there's no indication it's Islamist extremism. We'll bring you the latest on this story as it happens. Also tonight, a key measure of the UK economy shows the most dramatic fall since the financial crisis following Brexit.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
The moment many Republicans never thought possible. Donald Trump is now their official presidential candidate.
It feels quite normal.
And a first in the UK, a groundbreaking operation to give 2 new hands to a man who lost his in an accident.
In the south, the families of 2 severely disabled children win a landmark legal challenge against a council's decision to cut respite care. And the world's top sailors test the water ahead of this weekend's America's Cup.
Good evening. Up to 3 gunmen are on the loose tonight in Munich after a shooting at a shopping mall, which has left at least 9 people dead and many injured. The police have described it as a shooting rampage. Witnesses reported seeing gunmen in the streets around the Olympia shopping centre just before 7 o'clock local time this evening. One was then filmed emerging, firing out of a McDonald's opposite the shopping centre. Armed police have rushed to the scene and the city is now in lockdown. People have been told to stay indoors as the hunt for the attackers continues tonight. We'll have the latest from Munich in a moment. But first, James Robbins reports on the events which have unfolded this evening. And a warning, there are some graphic images.
This phone footage apparently shows the moment a group of people run into gunfire on the streets of Munich. Around the shopping centre there was panic as people tried to find some way to safety. Armed police and special forces poured in, but from the roof of this car park you can see what appears to be a gunman as shooting continues.
Here we see just ambulances and it's like firemen and police, but all this area is evacuated. All the streets now are, it's no cars, just on side of the streets, or all the streets are blocked. The people are scared, everybody are running around.
Witnesses told police there were 3 gunmen armed with what appeared to be long-barreled guns, possibly rifles, and the police quickly called this a terror attack. The dead bodies of several victims were found, covered as rapidly as possible in the midst of a developing tragedy. Hospitals called in extra staff to prepare for the possibility of large numbers of wounded. A German police spokesman said security forces were treating this as terrorism.
If someone walks into a shopping center with a long firearm, and those were the initial reports, and considering what happened over the past few weeks in Europe, I think it's justified to operate under this worst possible assumption, and it's good that we did so. We think there are up to 3 perpetrators. There are conflicting reports, but up to 3 perpetrators are on the run.
All public transport in Munich, a city of 1.4 million people, has been shut down, and police are urging residents to stay indoors. At another shopping centre, there were fears that they too might be under attack.
People came screaming inside the mall,
those people told us that there was shooting outside, and so the security, they closed the door of this mall and asked everybody to go upstairs in the 5th floor. So this is where I am right now with about 150 other folks, and we are asked not to leave the building.
Tonight, a state of emergency was declared across Munich. Germany's Interior Minister, in the air on his way to a holiday in America, said he would head home, as President Obama gave his first reaction to unfolding events.
We don't yet know exactly what's happening there, but obviously our hearts go out to those who may have been injured. It's still an active situation, and Germany is one of our closest allies, so we are going to pledge all the support that they may need in dealing with these circumstances.
Tonight, Germany is in shock. Some of the latest pictures show armed police inside the shopping mall, unsure if a gunman may still be there. It's still far from clear that this is part of a pattern of attacks blamed on jihadists. Suspicion has also fallen on far-right extremists. But the scale of the latest suffering in a major European city is not in doubt. James Robbins, BBC News.
Well, let's talk to our correspondent Andrew Plant, who's at Munich Airport for us this evening. Andrew, new information is coming in all the time while we're on air, but one thing we do know for sure is that 3 suspected attackers are on the run. What more can you tell us from there?
Fiona, a lot of confusion here at Munich Airport over the last half an hour, of course, as people arrived on their planes to get their buses and taxis into the city centre and were told that they can't go there because the roads are closed. People not really sure what to do here. Now, the latest on the manhunt, as we understand it, we know that witnesses said there were 3 men with guns. There are reports that one of those men has been killed. Police haven't confirmed that, but they have mentioned that report on Twitter. So potentially they are looking for 2 people. A manhunt here for 2 armed men. Now, we know just from local TV reports in the last 10 minutes or so that Austrian police are being drafted in to help. We're not too far away from the Austrian border here, 50 miles or so. That gives you an idea of the area that they're looking to search in here. And in the last couple of minutes, we've been told they will be beefing up security at the borders. So clearly a fear here that the men who are on the run right now could be heading towards one of the nearby borders.
Andrew Plant, for now, in Munich, thank you. And our diplomatic correspondent, James Robbins, joins me here in the studio. James, police started out by saying they believed this was a terrorist attack. They then went on to suggest they didn't think Islamist extremism was the motive. And there's now a suggestion that it could be something that's come from the far right.
I think it's clear, because of the scale of this attack, that it would normally be called terrorism. That there's little doubt. But who was responsible is far more questionable. The German authorities, the Chancellor's office, Chancellor Merkel's office, are steering people away from drawing any sort of quick conclusions. But I can tell you that there has been what appears to be a recording of one of the gunmen at the scene, which has emerged on social media tonight. And he's heard apparently cursing foreigners. And he appears to be a German who has a grievance based on his long years of unemployment. I think we need to be cautious about all of this, but it is worth bearing in mind that it is 5 years to the day since in Norway, Anders Behring Breivik killed 77 people, most of them young people, on a far-right campaign. There may be no connection, but it's something we have to bear in mind. What's not in doubt is that Germany has suffered on a scale that it hasn't seen for many years. James
Robbins, thank you very much. And there is a live page on the BBC website continually updating the events in Germany. You can find it at bbc.co.uk/news. And of course, we will bring you more as the story develops tonight. Here, new figures suggest that post-Brexit, one measure of the UK economy has fallen to its lowest level since the recession in 2009. The sudden drop in activity in manufacturing and services has led some analysts to warn of more pain to come, possibly even another recession. Speaking on a visit to China, the Chancellor, Philip Hammond, has warned a UK economic policy could be reset in the autumn, indicating a potentially significant change, though not what that change might be. Our economics editor, Kamal Ahmed, sent this report from Beijing.
The Chinese lion, protector of power and wealth. And here in Beijing, there is certainly both. The country funds everything from British railways to nuclear power stations. The UK government arrived with a message of reassurance for bankers and investors behind billions of pounds of funding that Britain, whatever our relationship with the European Union, is open for business.
You've mentioned the Brexit decision, which was a surprise, I think, to most of us. But we are determined to seize the opportunities that that decision represents, as well as managing effectively the challenges that it will give us in the short term.
One thing that is coming into sharp focus is that the government is very aware it needs support from foreign investors and that it may have to change its approach to tax and spending in Britain if the economy does take a turn for the worse.
In the slightly longer term, coming up to the autumn statement, if it's necessary, we have an opportunity then to reset fiscal policy to be appropriate for the economic circumstances we're in at the time.
What could that mean? More borrowing and more spending by the government to support the economy?
We've said already that we will no longer pursue a budget surplus in 2019-20, but we will replace that target with another framework. That will depend on the data that we see over the coming months.
That data, those figures, at least today, were poor. The key economic measure of UK business output and new orders fell to 47.7. Any number below 50 shows a slowdown. That's the lowest level since the 2009 recession. And manufacturing activity also dropped to the lowest for 3 years, although there was better news on exports.
We've had the survey today with some bad news in it. We've got worries in the housing market. We've got the exchange rate falling really quite significantly. But it won't be for a few months until we know, in a sense, quite how bad it's going to be.
Not everyone in Parliament was happy, and Labour said the government's rule on rapidly balancing tax and spending, the fiscal rule, should be scrapped.
Hammond needs to come back from China, change the fiscal rule, let government start investing again, because what that will do, it will mean private investment will come in as well, because confidence will be restored.
Here in Beijing, and the Chancellor has certainly been pressing the flesh, saying, yes, indeed, Britain is open for business. But I think the big point is actually about the UK economy. The government could change the way it taxes us if the economy needs it. It could change the way it spends its money if the economy needs it. It could even borrow more to spend on big infrastructure projects if the economy needs it.
Keeping the UK economy on the move may need Chinese help, particularly if slow is the speed we have to get used to. If it is, it won't just be in the Chinese capital where the UK will need to wave the flag. Kamal Ahmed, BBC News, Beijing.
Americanism, not globalism. That was Donald Trump's pledge last night as he accepted the Republican presidential nomination. Speaking in Ohio at the end of his party's national convention, he vowed an end to crime and violence, reiterated his promise to build a border wall with Mexico, and appealed to what he called forgotten Americans who work hard but no longer have a voice. Our North America editor, John Sopel, was watching.
I humbly and gratefully accept your nomination for the presidency of the United States.
Well, who'd have bet on those words being spoken by this man a few months back? And what nationalistic fervour there was in the hall.
USA, USA, USA.
He painted a dark picture of the state of America, a fearful place where crime was rampant. And he made this pledge.
I have a message to every last person threatening the peace on our streets and the safety of our police. When I take the oath of office next year, I will restore law and order to our country.
Though how he'd bring this transformation, he never spelt out. And he promised to perform similar miracles with the US economy, even if detail was scant on how it will be achieved.
I am going to bring back our jobs to Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York and Michigan and all of America.
On the world stage, America would play a much smaller role. He'd pursue Americanism, not globalism. And he piled all the blame for foreign policy failure at Hillary Clinton's feet.
The world is far less stable than when Obama made the decision to put Hillary Clinton in charge of America's foreign policy.
Lock her up! Lock her up! Lock her up, they cried. He told those who felt forgotten he'd be their voice. But he doesn't speak for everyone. This lone protester, like many others across America, finds Trump's populist message xenophobic and frightening. She was bundled away. Now it was time to lift the crowd and the familiar refrain.
We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. God bless you and good night. I love you.
If people were feeling deflated before this speech, and this has been a chaotic convention, they're not now. Few people can work a crowd like Donald Trump. He's won in Cleveland tonight. Now he's got 3.5 months to convince the country. The race has started in earnest.
It's about time a leader like Donald Trump stepped up and fixes this country, and he's going to do it.
All right, what about you, sir?
I think he just brings an optimism back to the United States that we haven't seen since Reagan.
I thought he was fantastic. I thought he did a great job.
Those who already loved Donald Trump loved last night. But to win, he needs to broaden his support significantly. And that is no small task. John Sokol, BBC News, Cleveland, Ohio.
This time, exactly a week ago, we were bringing you reports that a military coup was underway in Turkey, with troops sealing off bridges and helicopter gunships opening fire over the capital, Ankara. The coup failed, and all week the Turkish authorities have been rounding up tens of thousands of people. The Deputy Prime Minister has told the BBC that the coup plotters had infiltrated all government ministries, institutions and the private sector, and that there would be more arrests to come, as our correspondent Mark Lowen reports.
A week ago, he was almost overthrown. Today, President Erdogan savoured Friday prayers that he may never have seen. The coup failed and the victor was triumphant. My brothers, my nation gave an answer to those shameless people by standing tall like this, he said. Be united. Those who believe have won. The takeover began as rebel soldiers pounded Turkey's capital last Friday, bombing state buildings, tanks hitting those who stood in their way. Commandos tried to seize the president, who called people into the streets. Within hours, the coup was crushed. A state of emergency has been declared. The country is on high alert. 60,000 have been detained, suspended or fired, suspected followers of the alleged mastermind, the exiled cleric Fethullah Gülen.
Yeah, of course. We are,
The purge has spread to education, thousands of academics under investigation. They're afraid to talk openly. We found one who's opposed the president in the past and fears he could soon be on the list.
We are all now subject to interrogation and checking. I'm worried that I could be targeted by authorities. All these political and traumatic events causes anxiety and breaks my concentration.
The government has vowed to root out the coup plotters, but there are serious concerns over how wide the net is being cast. Turkey's Deputy Prime Minister told me the threat is worse than jihadists and Kurdish militants.
We are facing one of the biggest dangers Turkey has faced in 200 or 300 years. This terror organization is a bigger threat than ISIS and the PKK.
The government's critics, the president's critics, say that you are using this as an opportunity to go after your opponents.
Only people who have been 100% identified as being part of the organization are detained or investigated. But this is the tip of the iceberg. The number of detentions could get higher.
In central Ankara, the rubble remains, almost a shrine to Turkey's suffering. Turks are still trying to comprehend how their own people could have done this. It will be rebuilt, but the scars from last Friday will endure. And the question now is, what kind of Turkey will emerge? Can it unite, or will it be riven by revenge? After the most traumatic week in Turkey's recent history, the clamour for democracy is loud, but it depends on their unpredictable leaders' next move. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Ankara.
The head of the Unite Union, Len McCluskey, says MI5 could be responsible for the abuse and intimidation of some Labour MPs, particularly those who don't support the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn. Mr McCluskey claims the intelligence services could be attempting to stir up trouble. He also says right-wingers in disguise could be responsible for actions attributed to Mr Corbyn's supporters. 3 years ago, Chris King lost both hands in an industrial accident. Today, he's the first person in the UK to have received a double hand transplant, thanks to a groundbreaking operation at Leeds General Infirmary. Danny Savage has the story.
This is such a new lease of life.
Chris King is in awe of what surgeons have managed to do for him.
But as soon as I saw him, I realised I couldn't wish for anything better. It's better than any lottery win, because you feel whole again.
He lost both his hands in an accident involving a metal pressing machine at work 3 years ago. Now somebody else's hands have been transplanted to him, transforming his life.
It was like the hands were made to measure. They absolutely fit. And it's actually opened up a memory, because I could never remember what my hands looked like. After the accident, that part of your brain shut down.
This picture of Chris's hand shows how much of the donor's hands needed to be transplanted. Bones are joined with titanium plates, then surgeons connect key tendons and muscles before blood vessels are connected. He should get 80% back to normal.
He lost his hand at that angle, and so all of the fine structures that come up, we had to individually repair.
Professor Simon Kay, who carried out the transplant, says this highlights a new type of donor.
People haven't had to think about donating limbs before, but I think when you see Chris, you see what a life-transforming, life-restoring thing it is. And I'd like people to have the conversation they have about donating organs with their family, about donating hands.
The donor in relation to this transplant will remain anonymous, but his brother issued a statement saying he would have given the shirt off his back to help someone else. What followed was a 12-hour operation here in Leeds to repair Chris King's hands.
It's like somebody putting a arm around you and saying, "You'll be all right."
Danny Savage, BBC News, Leeds.
The International Paralympic Committee is set to exclude the entire Russian Paralympic team from this summer's Games in Rio. It follows allegations of state-organised doping. The former president of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev, has published an open letter calling for the International Olympic Committee to allow Russian athletes to compete at Rio. The IOC is considering a total ban on the whole team. Our sports correspondent Richard Conway has the latest.
Russian pride was evident at the 2014 Sochi Winter Paralympics. But pride comes before the fall, with Russia's Paralympic team now set to be excluded from this summer's Rio Games. The decision by the International Paralympic Committee follows an independent investigation which uncovered Russian state-organised doping implicating some 30 sports. 35 doping samples from Russian Paralympians were reported missing, with one source telling the BBC it's believed to be just the tip of the iceberg.
The IPC is obviously sending out a really strong message in terms of what it thinks of the Russian athletes. And although there have been a number of athletes who've received ban periods before, it's not been on the scale that we're now hearing about.
Meanwhile, efforts to ensure drug cheats aren't present at the Rio Olympic Games continue today. A further 15 competitors from London 2012 and 30 from Beijing in 2008 face suspension after a reanalysis of stored samples showed adverse results. And on Sunday, officials are also set to make a decision of whether to ban the entire Russian Olympic team. But tonight, one of the architects of modern Russia, Mikhail Gorbachev, has intervened in that debate, saying, "The principle of collective punishment is unacceptable for me. I am convinced that it contradicts the very culture of the Olympic movement based on universal values, humanism and principles of law."
4 years ago, London hosted one of the most memorable Olympics ever. But now the ripples by the damning evidence about Russian doping and a subsequent cover-up are threatening to divide and cause a schism in the Olympic movement, overshadowing not just previous games, but the one to come in Rio. If ever an Olympics needed a hero to deliver a dose of redemption, well, it's perhaps this one. And at tonight's London anniversary games, Usain Bolt showed a glimpse of that desired star quality, winning the 200 metres in style
while providing a timely reminder of why sport endures. Richard Conway, BBC News.
Let's go back to our main developing story tonight, the shooting at a shopping mall in Munich, which has left at least 9 people dead and many injured. Police are still looking for a number of gunmen tonight and have asked people to stay away from public spaces. Let's go back to our correspondent Andrew Plant, who's in Munich tonight. Andrew, it's a slightly confused picture. This story, of course, still developing as we're on air. Reports of 3 suspected gunmen. Now possibly 2 are on the loose, 1 is dead. What we do know, of course, is that people have been told to stay indoors in Munich. There must be a real sense of fear there.
Fiona, immediately after the attack and in the minutes afterwards, police here, Munich police, were asking social media users not to tweet pictures of the attack. They said it could even help the attackers. But there has been a real positive use of social media here too. Police were using it to get a very wide message out to a lot of people very, very quickly, asking them to stay out of the centre of Munich, stay indoors and to keep safe. They also used it to get in touch with taxi drivers, asking them very quickly not to pick up fares and take them into the city centre while this manhunt is ongoing. And something else that's been happening here too. For those people who were stranded in the centre of Munich, not knowing how to get out, not being able to access public transport, well, people have been tweeting the hashtag #OffenTür. It means open door. What they're saying is, if you've got nowhere to go, my house is open to you, come here and I will give you shelter.
Andrew Plant in Munich, thank you. You can get the latest on the Munich attacks over on the BBC News channel, of course. But that's all from us for now. On BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.